All right, now we're going to install the rear bug screens on the Ram Promaster. The Promaster is basically the same install as the Transit and the Sprinter van, except it has a slightly different weather stripping design at the top and at the bottom that make it a little bit unique. So we're going to kind of highlight on those areas. When it comes to tools for installing the screens, it's very basic hand tools that make the job a whole lot easier. One of them is step ladder, spring clamps. These are just from Amazon. They come in multiple sizes. I think these are the large ones and this is the small one. 3 or 4 of them is plenty. I find it helpful to have either needle nose pliers or a flathead screwdriver. This is for when you're installing the metal fabric clips to hold the screen on. Sometimes you have to move them, and it's easier to get them off if you have a flathead screwdriver to kind of pry them open, or a set of needle nose pliers. Next is a hammer. You can either use a regular hammer, or if you have a rubber mallet, that works fine as well. The other tool you're going to need is an X-Acto knife, or utility knife as some people call it. A drill is a handy thing to have. Once we have the screen finished the install, we do have some finishing screws that go in at the bottom just to keep the screen nice and tight. I'm just going to make a mark on the weather stripping. Yeah, I can see that. So I did a black line on the weather stripping. I think the tape will probably stick to the vehicle. Yeah. Then on the vehicle, I'm going to put a black line in line with that. And that way I know when I take the weather stripping off that I'm getting it back in the exact same spot and I don't have to guess. So the main thing that's different when you're installing the rear door bug screens versus the sliding door is instead of starting at the bottom edge and working your way around, is I actually like to start in the middle, in the top, and work my way down each side. So what we're going to do here is we're going to open up our case that the bug screen comes in. We're going to separate our hardware. So we've got our large fabric clips, our small fabric clips, and then there should be some truss screws and the foam tube. So you can see we've got the hardware, the foam tube, and then the screen. So like the sliding door, the first thing we're going to do is zip off the perimeter. Zip it all the way out. So if you look at the perimeter, the inside material, the piece that goes on the inside, it has what almost looks like a bit of a coating on it. So that's the inner facing part of the rear perimeter. It's a little bit windy out here today, which is going to make this a little expert level install for me. When you find the top center on the Promaster rear doors, the weather stripping is very, very close to the D-rings that the rear doors latch into. Some people might want to not pull the weather stripping out between the D-rings. Your option there is this center strip is to basically cut it off after you've installed it and just not even bother. So you would pull this area here. You wouldn't pull the weather stripping out. You would pull it out from here down and here down, leave this piece in. The downside is you're going to have a little bit of a gap here that is going to be an opening. But we have had people who have said that they struggle to get this weather stripping in and out in this area. So that is an option. For this install, I'm going to show you how to get this weather stripping in and out and install it fully in that area. But just keep in mind, if you are struggling getting this out, that is an option that you don't have to do. So once you've located the top center, you'll see this vertical bar tack here, that is the midline. So this midline is going to line up with the cameras, kind of like what we're going for. When I visually look at my midline here, I'm just slightly off of center, so I'm just going to line up my bar tack just to the left side of the line that I drew here. First thing I'm going to do is use my clamps and kind of get the corners, get it pinned up in the corners. Okay, so I've got clamping it up, you're not really worried about anything other than just having it held in place. And you've got enough slack to get the midline where it needs to be. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull off the weather stripping. To get it out from inside here, you kind of have to roll it. So you kind of have to like pull the back edge and kind of roll it up. So you can see as I'm kind of pulling it off and sort of rolling it towards me. And then you can see I can get it out. So that's how you get it out. It goes in the reverse of that. You kind of have to get that bottom edge in and then roll it up. So I'm going to try to get rid of some of this white silicone. There's a little bit more. The main issue with the white silicone is that if you don't get it off and you need to adjust it, it does kind of get all over the perimeter and it's just kind of hard to clean off. It's also not a bad idea if you see there's an excessive amount in the channel of the weather stripping, you can give that a wipe. So what you're going to do is you're going to take the mid piece here, and you can see how these cutouts are made to go around these channels. We do have the red alignment aid, so that's what you're going to be lining up with here. I can visually tell these are going to be small fabric clips. So I'm going to pin it in the middle with a small clip. I think I can get a small one on. No, maybe it's a large. Okay, so now that you've got that one set, now you just want to kind of visually get the alignment aid properly. So I'm a little too far that way, so I'm just going to pull it over a little bit. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And now I'm going to tack it on either side of the door latches with another. It feels the exact same thickness, so I'm just going to go straight to the large clip because I don't feel like fighting it. A large there. And on this side, come around, line up the red alignment aid with the bottom of the pinch weld and tack it in place. So once you get that done, now you can just pick a side and work your way down and around. I'm going to go this way because the camera is set up in a way that makes that side easier to shoot. So we'll start going down the left side. So I'm going to tack the whole top to the corner and then work my way down. All right, before we start going across the top and down the left side, my film crew let me know that it doesn't look to them like the bar tack is directly in line with the camera. Basically, it's close, but I agree now that I'm looking right at it, it's not 100%. The main thing is you're just trying to center these door latches for the tops of the doors inside the cutouts that are there. So there is a little bit of wiggle room there, but basically if you get this center piece kind of centered between these two ones and the bar tack is close to in line with the camera, then you're going to be fine. Don't worry about if it's off a little bit. Because I said it, people might have focused on it needed to be in line, but the main thing is just to get it sort of centered on these latches. So now we're going to work our way across the left side and down, or the driver's side. So what I'm going to do is move my clamp past the corner, pull some more off. So a small one, put another small one in. Now I'm going to work the corner. So the corner is the same as it is on the rear, where you're going to use your hand and you're going to kind of spread your fingers and kind of wrap the material around the edge like this, and then you're going to pin it in place with a fabric clip. You want to get the corners nice and tight. A lot of tension in the corners. That's kind of the key to making the install look good and the screen door opening work properly. I'm going to use a large clip. So again, I'm going to come in here, put a lot of tension in the corner. Another large one. Okay, so now I've got the corner kind of pinned in, and I'm happy with how that's looking. what I'm going to do is, because I don't want to take too much more of this side off until I put some of this back up, so I'm actually going to change to that side and then get it to the same kind of point as this one, so then I can put the top of the weather stripping back in place before finishing off the bottom sides. Because I know if I start pulling off more than this, the weather stripping is going to fall off, and I do not want that to happen. Okay, so I'm just going to pull a little bit more of the weather stripping down. I moved my clamp. Just going to clamp this in there. So again, I'm just going to tack this across the top with small clips. Again, if you have a friend, it is very beneficial to have them handing you the clips and the hammer when you need it. So I got one tacked in there. So yeah, same thing with the corner. This is just, I mean, I've done a lot of them, so I kind of get how it works. You just got to take your time in the corners. And if you get the corner looking good, it makes everything else so much easier. Lower that down a little bit. So I'm just spreading my fingers, kind of tucking it in there. Grab a large clip. I also recommend, if you can find a windy day, to avoid it. Try to pick a day where it's not windy. It does make things a little trickier, which is a little trickier than they need to be, that's for sure. All right, we'll do one more on the corner here, kind of coming down the straight. And then we're going to put the weather stripping back on the top and kind of see where we're at. All right, so this is where the mark is nice that I put on the weather stripping. Fingers crossed I can still see it. Yeah, right there. So that's what I want to get lined up with the mark that I have there. And that way I know the weather stripping is going back in the exact same spot I took it off. From what I remember, this is the hardest kind of part, is rolling this weather stripping back in place. But if it came off, it can go back in. So you just kind of roll it up. So yeah, just kind of, you roll it towards you, and then you use your fingers to kind of guide it back on the channel. Thing that might be helpful is a flathead screwdriver, or these needle nose will probably work, to just kind of push it above the door latches. But you can see that looks good. We'll zoom in, it'll show a tight shot of this, but you can see now I've got nice tight coverage around the door latches here. So let's work our way down now. Okay, so I've got the top all re-secured. Looks really good. I'm really happy with that so far. I'm going to move my clamps to basically somewhere in the corners so I can pull that off, and now I'm going to do the sides. So, all right, we're going to start with the passenger side of the vehicle. So now that I've got it clamped, I don't have a problem pulling the entire weather stripping off all the way down to the bottom. The one thing you'll notice on the Promaster vehicles is the weather stripping has this funny molded piece at the bottom here. We'll get a close-up of it and insert it. That it's kind of tricky to get off and on. So what we actually prefer to do is, just as you're coming down to that point, is cut a slit in the perimeter piece so it goes around that. And I'll show you what I mean in a second here. The other thing you'll notice on the side pieces, because the Promaster rear doors aren't uniform, they're uniform but they're not vertical, is we've included these bar tacks. So there's sort of 3 bar tacks on each side instead of the alignment aids. And those bar tacks are what you want to get on the pinch weld. So I'm just going to give this side a wipe quickly, get some of the guck off, and then we'll get it pinned in place. Okay, so now we're going to work down this side. I actually like to just kind of put right around the bar tacks of fabric clip. So the bar tacks, again, they go right on the pinch weld. So I'm just going to put one here just below it, So you'll notice the bottom weather stripping, it mounts to the bottom of the van with this sort of custom molded piece. And it's a little bit tricky to get the weather stripping and the perimeter all the way down to the bottom. So what I do when I install it is I actually take a pair of scissors and I just cut about a 1.5 to 2 inch slit in line with the bar tack and where it's going to meet here, and then I just kind of pull over top of each side. So you can see here I just cut a little slit like so. See if that's enough. So you can see I've just cut a little slit in it so like this can go on either side of this piece, so I don't have to remove this. Pull it down, and you want to get it, you know, as close to the bottom as we can. Come up here and steal a little bit of fabric. And you can see now I'm nice and close to the bottom. Keep in mind this van that I'm doing it on, it doesn't have a finished floor in it. This just has the factory metal floor. So by the time you add in the finished floor, you're going to come up a little bit. So I can pull it down a little bit more. That's probably good there. Now I'm going to just install the weather stripping back in place. Working my way up. And there we go. And because I marked the middle and I knew I got that started in the same spot, and because the bottom is fixed, the weather stripping goes right back into place just how we took it off. So now I have to do the other side. Once I got the other side done, then I can zip in the screen and just kind of see if I need to adjust the tension anywhere to make sure the magnetic opening works properly. So let's spin around to here. So yeah, we're just going to move the clamp. Where do I got? I'm going to leave the clamp there actually. Just pull this off. I'm giving it a pretty quick wipe because we've got the weather stripping off. Again, we're going to tack the screen in place at right around the bar tacks. The bar tacks are these red stitched sort of 1-inch sections. Those go right on the pinch welds. I feel like every time I need a small clip, I grab the large clip bucket, and every time I need the other side, I grab the wrong one. But at least they're sorted. Again, I'm going to sort of visually look at where does it make sense to cut this. Right here. About 1 inch and maybe just under 2 inches. That lets you... Well, I ended up with some extra weather stripping, so that means I didn't get the top corner quite right. So I'm just going to peel the weather stripping off carefully because I need to work it up into the corner up there. So I'll start at the bottom. I'll make sure I got it down as much as it'll go. So yeah, I've got the weather stripping now installed all the way around. Got the perimeter in. Again, it might take some fine tuning, but once you have it all the way in, now is the time to zip in the actual screen and just see where you're at. Okay, so we're just going to grab the insert. On the rear side of the van, the magnet tube, it goes on the passenger side of the vehicle, so the right side. And that's also where the zipper starts. Oops. So you're going to find the magnet tube. And zip that into the perimeter. And if you have an extra hand, sometimes this piece is a little bit easier to get in with 2 people, but once you get it started, then you can just kind of tease it all the way around. Or the magnet tube is closing properly. It's got enough slack. The wind's kind of blowing it open here. So this is where if you had a finished floor in the van, This is where you would use these nylon webbing loops, and you'd actually screw that into the floor. We'll insert a clip of how that works. And that's what kind of stops it from falling like this. The wind's kind of blowing it away, and it keeps it in place. But overall, I'm happy with the way that is working. You know, the biggest thing you wanted is so when you let go, the top grabs and there's enough slack for the bottom to pull together is kind of the main thing. You want this foam tube to be just above the bottom, which on this install, it probably looks like it's a little bit high. The reason it looks like it's a little bit high, again, is because there's no floor in this van. So in most people's vans, they're going to have at least another, say, probably ½ inch if they're just doing like a ½ inch plywood floor. But a lot of people are going to have a ½ inch plus like 3/4 inch insulation for an insulated floor, plus the finished floor, whether that's like a vinyl plank or marine vinyl one-piece floor. If your van does just have the factory floor and that is it, there is room at the top to pull the whole screen down. You can drop the whole screen. You would just have to, at the top edge with the alignment aids, you would have to not be on the alignment aid. You would have to pull it down a little bit and just make sure you've got a uniform distance from that red alignment aid. There's very few people that are going to have this issue, because even if you don't put in a floor from the factory, it does come with a wood floor in here that raises the floor up. I'm happy with that height and how everything's looking. Visually, when I stand back and I look at all of the zippers, I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but you can kind of see in this section here a little bit, it bows a little bit. So I would probably relax this piece in here a little bit, just kind of take it out, just let a little bit of slack out of there. That looks better. Looks like in here I can take a little bit out. So you can just kind of walk around and fine tune it. The main thing really is if you're happy with how the door is closing. This side, yeah, like this line is perfect. When I look at this side here, we'll set a shot of that. So I would probably finick around a little bit. Yeah, it's hard for the camera to pick it up, but you can see right in this section here, kind of between my hands, this zipper kind of pulls over a little bit there. So this is an area where I would pull the weather stripping off. It does feel a little tight, and just relax the fabric clip a little bit just to give it a more uniform look. So yeah, if you look at this side here, this is a uniform strip all the way up and down. So that's kind of what we're going for ideally. The last thing that you would do is taking a fresh blade, and we'll insert clips of this from the Sprinter van, is you would trim up the perimeter all the way around. You want to use basically a brand new blade. You can use the same one for both screens if you have both, but the newer the blade, the easier it cuts, and the nicer the job it does. But yeah, overall, I'm really happy with the way that install looks. The foam tubing here, which makes it a lot easier to roll, is you slide that into the foam tube at the bottom. Just kind of work your way in, just like that. So yeah, you grab the silicone zipper pulls, zip it up. The reason this one rolls from the outside of the van is because a lot of people in their vans, they go with a platform fixed bed that ends kind of, you know, say around my shoulder height, and they don't have access to the inside of the van to roll it from the inside. So for that reason, we roll from the outside like that, and we use the G-hooks to clip it in place like so, and you can cinch it in place like that. And you have a nice tight tube at the top that's ready to deploy. When you jump into the inside of the Promaster van, one thing that is unique is because of the way that we have the screen going around the door latches. On the other models of van, the screen actually sort of hangs on those hooks, but because of the really tight tolerance between the weather stripping and those hooks, we have to do the cutouts around. So the screen isn't, the weight of the screen's not supported by those hooks. So to make up for that, we installed, very similar to what we do on the sliding door, is we have these straps. And these straps, what you can do is you can either, because you have access to this channel, you can run a through bolt through here. So put a machine screw with a nylock nut through here, and there's one on each side. Or you can use a riv nut. And worst case scenario is you could use a self-tapping screw. And all that does is just kind of make sure all of the tension and force of the bug screen is on these straps, as opposed to only relying on the weather stripping to hold it in place. So if you have access to this area, you know, some people, depending on how they've trimmed out their van, or maybe they're installing the screens a little later in the process of their build. If you don't have access, it's not a big deal, but if you do have access, I highly recommend using these straps to kind of secure it in place on each side, just like we do on the sliding door.